The calls for diplomacy are increasing, particularly from the intellectual class. I find that interesting. But the forces of Joe Biden will not and cannot heed those calls. Let's talk about why. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and there are numerous calls for diplomacy. We see the calls going up, particularly amongst, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit amongst the intellectual class. We're starting to see some of the very wealthy and powerful people, Elon Musk, etc., start to ask, what's going on here? Why can't we listen? Why can't we talk? And in fact, there's a certain level of it. What's interesting is this. The people who are calling for the end of the Ukraine conflict through diplomacy inject, and this is interesting. We'll talk about it. Always inject realism, right? And they get attacked for that. Stephen, what's his name? Jeffrey Sachs. Recently, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, who is a guy who he has a history. Well, here's what's interesting about Dr. Sachs. He has a history of being like king neoliberal at one point. But I must say that in recent years, in the last 10 years, I mean, yeah, in the 1990s, he was a guy who was the shock therapy neoliberal king, right? But I've been really paying attention to Dr. Jeffrey Sachs over the last 10 years. And regardless of what he said in the past, he's been one of the sanest voices when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to domestic policy. Dr. Jeffrey Sachs is a brilliant guy. That's without question. He's a highly intellectual person. But he has, regardless of what you think about his previous, neoliberal inclinations, over the last, I'll just say 10 years, he has been one of the sanest voices in the United States. He really has, coming out of the United States. And he's recently stated the obvious. He's gone on TV and he said, look, this thing needs to end in diplomacy. And, we're risking nuclear war. The squeeze ain't worth the juice, as they say, right? It's not worth it. This is too big of a risk for humanity and all creatures on earth. We gotta do something here. We need to go with diplomacy, right? Very, very reasonable, very reasonable. And he would even talk about the background. Realism. Here's what happened. Let's be honest about this thing. The NATO has creeped up to Russia's doorstep, and they're a superpower. Superpowers don't buy that crap. You creep up to the doorstep of a superpower, you're probably going to get a fight. That's the bottom line. We're doing the same thing in Taiwan. That's the reality. So that's realistic politics, right? Recently, Elon Musk. Yeah, he's a billionaire. His money came from apartheid South Africa. I got my issues with Elon Musk. He has admitted to supporting, at minimum, one regime change operation, the one in Bolivia, where conveniently for him, Libya has the like 40% of the world's lithium reserves or something. So trust me, I'm not trying to pretend like this guy is the second coming of Gandhi or or Martin Luther King or so. No, he's a billionaire, and he's got billionaire issues. Billionaires do billionaire things, as they say, and regime change probably is one of them, so they can fill their filthy, stinking pockets, right? But recently, Musk has said, look, how about let's do some diplomacy here? And again, realism. Come on, guys, let's be honest. What's going on here? The Russians have some legitimate concerns. And I think that's where I'm going to go with this. That's the important part. But I think that's the thing that ties together the calls for diplomacy. Two things, right? Number one, the danger to all humanity, to all, as they say, to all creatures great and small. So what ties together the cries for diplomacy? I think two things. One, the cost is too high. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. This is the greatest threat in the history of humankind, and we need to mitigate. We need to neutralize the threat, right? That's number one, the first. The second being, you will almost always find those who are calling for diplomacy right now admit something, and that is Russia has legitimate security concerns. That this is Russia's border, and Russia is saying you want to move up to our border, you want to put missiles and nukes and all kind of crazy Nazis in on our border. We got problems with that. We've been down that road before, and no, ain't happening. I think it's like this. I think the Russian position is you can bring this crap to our border, but you're going to have to be willing to fight to keep it there. Simple as that. You can bring, we're not going to just let you stage all of your military hardware on our border so that you can attack us anytime you want. And when I use the word stage, I'll make it simple. Here's what I mean. And I like to use references from my life. When I was in law enforcement, never forget this. You like we had some thefts or burglaries or home invasions, whatever. One particular circumstance, somebody came home and they found like their back sliding glass door was open and like all this stuff was beside it, like computers and tablets and things that criminals would want to steal, right? And you know what's the deal? And I remember, I got the report somebody was there for whatever, our officers were there for another reason or whatever the case, it got down to this. Here's what I mean. What did the criminals do? As a person who was taught investigations, what word would a trained investigator use to describe that circumstance? The perpetrators, the suspects, right, went around the house, they grabbed a bunch of things that they wanted and they put it by the door so that when they left, they could grab it all at one time and run out. What did they call that? They staged it. They took the things, they staged all of the things that they wanted to steal in one spot, put them all in one spot, left them sitting there so that when they were ready to leave, they could grab them all at one time and run out the door rather than go out with one in, out in, out in. No, they're going to grab everything at the same time and leave. They staged it. They put things in one place, right? That's really what the way the Russians see it. The US is doing what they do. They're staging their military hardware and personnel all around us so that they can A, use that to intimidate us, B, if they want to cut us off and choke us out and do a cut off our goods from going in and out. They got their hardware and stuff staged to do that. Bottom line is it's a way to menace Russia, right? To get on their border, set all the stuff up and say, we can do whatever we want anytime we want. We can attack you. We got bases surrounding you. And Russia's saying, as a superpower, I have the military ability the military capabilities to address that. And so therefore, I'm not going to wait until you get it all staged. I'm not going to wait. If somebody's like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lift weights and I'm going to take Kung Fu. I'm going to take whatever, Shotokan, you name it. I'm going to take that for 5 years and work out. And at the end of those 5 years, I'm going to be in such good shape and I'm going to be so good at martial arts that I'm going to come there and I'm going to beat you to death with my bare hands. And I'd say, oh, well, I've got a better idea. What, I better kill you now. Right? Because what am I going to do? Wait for you to get the ability to kill me? Nope, I'm killing you now. If you're saying you're going to set everything up, and once the ability to kill me gets there, you're going to get it. Like there's a gun laying over there, and you look and you say, "What are you going to do?" I'm going to run over there and grab that gun and shoot you. You ain't getting to that gun. I'll put it like this: you may get to the gun, but not without a fight, and not without a hard fight to the death. You ain't getting to the gun. If I got anything to do with it, you ain't going to want to get to the gun. At some point, you're going to give up. You're going to say, he bit me. He poked me in the eyes. He threw sand in my face. My God, he's a madman. He did everything. Yeah, but you ain't getting to that gun, right? You're staging hardware to utilize against me. And I know you're doing it. I ain't waiting around for you to do it. Nobody in their right mind would do it, right? So the recognition that the Russian government has legitimate security concerns. So the people calling for diplomacy says, look, it's too dangerous. And plus, let's sit down and talk with them and strike a deal. Right? Makes sense, doesn't it? If you're concerned about human beings and things of that nature. Now, why, you may ask, why? Why in the hell can't the forces of Dark Brandon do that? And people are perplexed. Why? Come on, guys. We got to look out for, we got to think about the future. What about the children? It's always about the children. My God, what about the children and their future and our present? For God's sake, if we die now, we have no present. All this kind of stuff, right? So people are kind of flabbergasted. Why? Why, Dark Brandon? Why won't you listen? Why won't, okay? Let's get to the reality of this situation. Something that a lot of Americans probably, and a lot of these people either won't or can't discuss, get to, accept. Okay. Let me give you one scenario. If the forces of Dark Brandon, if the neocons were telling the truth about Russia, right? And neocons and telling the truth should never be used in the same sentence. If they were telling the truth, they could do some kind of a diplomatic solution. Why? Because their concerns would be about Russia invading Europe. And if they were honest and they said, we're concerned about Russia invading Europe, then they could set up any kind of a deal because their concern would be Russia invading Europe. We got to protect Europe. We got to look out for Europe. Poor little Europe. We can't have the Russians eat them alive, right? And all you'd need would be some kind of a diplomatic solution where we could guarantee the Russians wouldn't invade Europe. Well, let's think back very shortly. Why have the U.S. been has the U.S. been against the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? It wasn't because the Russians were going to invade Europe, was it? It was because they believed that Russia and Europe was economically integrating itself. In fact, it's just the opposite of invading Europe. What they were concerned with was they have a Cold War narrative. The Russians are evil and the Russians are going to invade Europe. But the Russians were doing what? They were selling gas to Europe. They're like, hey, Europe, you want more? But Germany went to the Russians and said, we'd like to build another pipeline. The Russians were a little, we don't know about that. Germany guaranteed, you don't have to worry. Let's build Nord Stream 2. We'll make sure everything flows nicely. The Russians listened to them. But you probably don't know this. It was Angela Merkel and her people that asked the Russians to build Nord Stream 2, and they reluctantly agreed. Okay. So what was going on? Russia and Europe were integrating their economic systems and they were becoming as one. Here's what I mean. Okay, you got flowers and you got bees, right? Bees eat the things that are, they eat the pollen and things like that. They use that to make honey and all this kind of bee stuff, right? And flowers exist because bees come along and take their pollen and move it from one plant, you know what I mean, from one plant to the next, and they are able to, have grow, and they're able to reproduce and all of these things, right? So with no flowers, no bees, no bees, no flowers. So you could argue that bees and flowers are a field of activity, right? Two things that work together like that. For instance, you got a car. A car has an engine. We arbitrarily use our language to say the car has an engine rather than we've got a car. And part of the properties of a car is an engine. We're using language to separate. We're using grammar to separate the car from its engine. In the real world, there's no separation of the car. Cars have engines. Well, look at that. The car has a steering wheel. No, steering wheels are the nature of the nature of a car is to have a steering wheel, right? So we can arbitrarily separate things that aren't really separate. So as we move forward and we look at what's going on here, we say the border, the Russians, because they were integrating their economic system through selling a tremendous amount of energy to Europe, and because Europe was integrating its economic system by utilizing a model that included very reasonably priced energy from Europe, from Russia, to make their economic model grow, they were becoming a field of activity. The Russian Eurasian continent was, as is the nature of business, integrating their what's the term I'm looking for? Their assets. Europe had an asset. It had people who were technologically skilled, and it had labor, and it had motivation, right? And it had access to energy, right? It had certain things, but it needed something. What did it need? It needed well-priced energy. And it was getting that from Russia. So as those two things grow, and as the Europeans, Europe's economy grows, Russia and Europe become a field of activity. But meanwhile, Russia's tightly integrated with China. Now, Europe says, well, we need certain things from China to do this. And what the US saw was the world around it, Russia, China, the EU, were becoming a field of activity, right? That relied on each other and worked with each other to survive and grow. That ain't what the US wants. That ain't what the neocons want. They want authoritarian and totalitarian control. Right now, we got bases all that over Africa. Why is that? Because we want control of what the Africans can and can't do. We want control of what the South Americans and the Asians and everybody, control of everybody. You're a threat, you're a threat, you're a threat. Everybody's a threat, right? So the US looked at it and said, we must stop the integration, the economic integration of Europe with Russia, even though it's already happened. We got to stop it, which means reversing the great strides that Russia has made, that Europe has made economically. Okay, so here's the issue. Why can't the forces of Dark Brandon, of Joe Biden, accept diplomacy and reality, right? Remember what I said. The people who are calling for diplomacy say, number one, Russia has legitimate, number one, there is a great threat to humankind and it's dangerous. We got to mitigate the threat. Number two, Russia has legitimate legitimate security interests on their border. Now, that's accepting reality. And that is acceptable. That could be good motivation for a resolution if you were honest and your real concern was the security of Europe. Now, let's talk about the neocons and what their real concern is. Their real concern is a couple. Number one, this is not in any particular order. Military industrial complex wants to get paid. And how can you justify a bunch of all this money that you're spending on ships and planes and blah, 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 if Europe and Russia and China are all economically integrated to the point where nobody's going to attack anybody? You see, if those entities become economically integrated, it's the opposite of a threat. They are now rely on each other, so they can't threaten each other because nobody can survive. If they're totally economically integrated, the Europeans will economically die if they cut themselves off for the Russians and the Chinese. And the Russians and the Chinese, because they're getting paid, they're making money. They're like, hey, we're trying to eat, bro. Can you help us out? Yeah, I need your energy. Yeah, I need your industry. I need this or that. Right now, everybody's ready to eat. Everybody's doing well. Everybody's sitting down at the table. Right? They're growing. They're at home. Whatever the Chinese are doing there, what they call Chinese with socialistic characteristics. The Russians are doing their particular model, which includes the nationalization, which they've done of their energy markets and other markets. They're making money. The Russians are doing their the Europeans are doing their neoliberal stuff, but they're still getting paid, right? Everybody's getting paid. Everybody's happy except the neocons, because the only thing they want is power over everything and everybody subordinated to them. Okay, so the reality from the neocons perspective is in some instance, they know this. Their motivations, their plan is unacceptable, morally and ethically unacceptable to most people. How do I know they know this? Because they lie and deceive people. They wouldn't have to lie and deceive people if their plan was honest. They could come out and say, look, we cannot do a diplomatic deal with Russia. Why? Because Russia is right. You see, my friends, Russia's complaint is the neocons are trying to surround us with bases. They want to get nuclear missiles on our base so they can do on our borders so they'll be able to do a first strike. They'll be able to get inside of our nuclear umbrella. They'll be able to attack us with nukes and everything else. They'll be able to cut off our economics if they want to, cut off our ships, everything. So the bottom line is the Russians are saying the neocon administration of Joe Biden is absolutely lying to you people. You're pretending like they're looking out for the Europeans. They want to overthrow our government and they want to steal our shit, and we ain't giving it up. And they're also saying to the Europeans, you bastards are stupid because they're throwing you to the dogs. They're taking you down and you're just letting them do it. You may be idiots, but we ain't. You may allow them to eat you for lunch, but that we ain't on the menu. That's what's really going on. And if it was true, then if Jeffrey Sachs were to say to Joe Biden and the neocons, Joe Biden and the neocons, look, we want to strike a deal, a diplomatic deal with the Russians. We give them security on their border, and we back off. We allow the Europeans to buy gas, and everybody's happy, and we move forward. If Joe Biden was honest, he'd say, we can't do that there, Jeffrey Sachs, we can't do it. Why? Because we really are trying to surround them, because their security concerns are right. We really are trying to put missiles on their border, and we're trying to make a lot of money for the military industrial complex when we do that. So because they're telling the truth, the Russians are right. We are actually doing exactly what they're accusing of us of doing. And if you don't believe me, just take a little float over to Taiwan. All the bullshit that we talk about, yes, the Russians, they want to expand, they want to do this, they want to eat your children, blah, 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 right? Well, isn't it odd that we happen to be on China's border doing exactly the same thing? If, in fact, the security concern is about Europe, then why are we on China's border doing exactly the same thing? Exactly, using the exact same verbiage, the exact same plan, the exact same everything, right? So we can't, because we are attempting to have a unipolar world. We're attempting, if he'd say to Jeffrey Sachs, look, you need to read the Wolfowitz Doctrine. We cannot allow any other rise of any great powers or any other regional powers that could contest us. We want to rule the world. We're friggin' Nazis. We're expansionists. That's who the neocons are. I don't know if you've looked at the Azov Battalion, but what do you know about them? They're Sig Highland, they're goose stepping, they're doing stuff that Nazis do, right? There's a reason we're supporting them. There's a reason the neocons love the Nazis. They have an ideological alignment with them. The ideological alignment is not of necessarily, protecting the white race or this or that. They don't give a shit about that stuff. The ideological alignment is a immoral and unethical greed for power and a feeling of entitlement, right? The entire world is there to benefit me, and I need more power, and a paranoia that says everybody out there is either with me or against me, and most of them are against me, and therefore I should use force against those, right? It's the law of the jungle, the tooth and fangs and claws. We'll go out there. The world is an evil place, and we're the most powerful. We shall destroy all of our enemies, and everybody's our enemies. Our enemies are those who will not succumb to every wish that we need, and they must be put down with extreme prejudice. That's what the neocons are saying. So the truth of the matter is this: those who are calling for diplomacy are going to have to change their approach. And in fact, here's what Dr. Jeffrey Sachs is going to have to do. Here's what Elon Musk, the only hope they have. You cannot appeal to the neocons because they are liars. They're going to tell you whatever. They're going to attack you. They're going to send their NAFO mutts on a Twitter after you. They're not listening to you. You are a threat. You're no different to them than Putin. You're no different to them than Xi. You're no different to them than Iran. You're no different to them than Venezuela or Cuba or Nicaragua or any other country that says, I'm not going to listen to you. I want an independent foreign policy. That's what you are to them, Jeffrey Sachs and Elon Musk, and they will treat you the same. They will come for you. They will come after you. That's all they do. That's what they do. They're a hateful, evil, aggressive bunch. So what Jeffrey Sachs has to do, what these other people have to do is simple. They've got to tell the truth. They've got to do what I'm doing right now. Don't appeal to the neocons. You're wasting your breath. But what you can do is appeal to the masses, because your voice is powerful. Because when people hear Elon Musk, when people hear Jeffrey Sachs, right, they think, okay, well, those people, like, they know what they're powerful. But right or wrong, People respect them, right? It is, the old, if you look at logical fallacies, one of the logical fallacies is an appeal to authority, right? Well, of course I'm right. Well, even the president of the United States agrees with me. You appeal to authority to say I'm right because authoritative people agree with me. Now, that is in fact a logical fallacy that's used by many people. It's not accurate, but it works in many times. So people will say, well, Elon Musk says this, and even Dr. Jeffrey Sachs says this. So what they're going to have to do is take their focus off of the neocons, wasting your damn time. These are some rotten bastards. You're going to have to now look to the people, use your voice, and say to the people, I think we're being had. I think we're being lied to. We have to accept the reality that other superpowers, that other countries have legitimate security concerns. The neocons won't even do that. Why won't they do that? Because they are the security concerns. I put it like this, but it's not an accurate metaphor. You go to the wolves and you say, look, we need to build a fence. Why? Because wolves are trying to eat our sheep and we got to keep the sheep out. Can we work on a plan where we have a security plan for the sheep? The wolves are going to be like, you do know we're wolves, right? Yeah. And we eat sheep. Yeah. Okay. Right. At that point, they have established something. The security plan ain't going to work for us because we're wolves. And if we go through with that, we get no sheep. And we're trying to eat the sheep, but we will pretend that we are. And they'll say, let's make a nice big fence. Yeah. How big? Well, it's got to have a gate. I mean, people got to go through every now and then. So we'll have a gate. Okay. Well, yeah, but the wolves might get them. And the wolves are like, yeah, we wouldn't want that. Why don't you give us a key? And if we need to get through the gate every now and then, for fence maintenance, whatever the case may be, maybe we've got a meeting with the sheep or something. We'll go through. We will always alert you that we're going through to make sure that the sheep are safe. And the negotiators will say to the wolves, great plan. Hey, let's do it. And meanwhile, the wolves are having their own meeting, like, hey, how can we sneak a sheep out every now and then to eat them? Well, we'll just pretend like we won't advise them when we're going through the gate. We'll grab a sheep, we'll eat them, and then we'll pretend like we didn't, we don't know what happened. Bottom line is this: the motivation of the sheep and the negotiators and the wolves are all different. The sheep don't want to get eaten. The negotiators want to get a deal where everybody's happy, and the wolves will never be happy and can't be happy unless they're allowed to eat sheep, because the nature of wolves is to eat sheep. So if you're trying to get a deal between the neocons and the Russians, now don't get me wrong, I'm not implying that the Russians are sheep. We'll call the Russians a manner of wolves too, because they are strong enough to defend themselves. They're armed sheep, right? Kung fu sheep, right? They're able to defend themselves from the wolves pretty well, right? But at some point, the negotiators, if they're going to deal with this, got to be honest with themselves. They got to say, look, we're trying to set up a deal between the wolves and the sheep, but we got to be honest. One of the problems that we have is the wolves inherently kind of want to eat the sheep. So how can we come up with a deal? Now, they can come up with a deal and they can say, here's what we'll do. We'll go down to the local store and we'll buy you some, Beyond Meat, and give it a shot. And if you like Beyond Meat, well, then you don't have to eat sheep. And then the wolves will eat it and like, it's not all that bad. It needs a little bit of spices, but we can do this. Now you can get a deal. But until you address the reality, the principal factor that is holding up no gate negotiations is that the wolves can't come out and say, we really want to eat the sheep, so we're bullshitting you with this deal because we got to eat sheep because we're wolves. Until you address that, no deal. So until the time that the Dr. Jeffrey Sachs and these people of the world actually come out and say, we got to be honest, the forces of dark Brandon are some lying bastards, and they really want to screw over the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians, and all this bullcrap they're talking is neocon lies. Until they get to that, and they bring that to the American people, and they get the American people to understand that, they get nowhere with negotiations. Once the American people get to understand that, then they can start to push back on the lying media and the lying dark Brandon forces, et cetera, and say, look, guys, we know who you are now. We know you're lying. We know you want to take out the Russians and the Chinese and the Iranians and everybody else who wants an independent foreign policy. So what we're going to do is we're going to vote your asses out, or whatever the case may be. I don't know, voting machines that we got might not be so easy, but you get my picture, right? You must address the foundational issues here accurately. And that is, the forces of dark Brandon intended to impoverish. They intended to sever the ties between Europe and Russia and China. See, people say Russia and China are inextricably linked when it comes to the neocons and Iran. They're all one thing. They are threats to hegemony, but because, here's the problem that the neocons have: the hegemony is already gone. They're trying to hold on to something that doesn't exist. In fact, a great book, Simulacra and Simulacrum, you know how I read all the time. There was 3 books that you had to read in order to be an actor or actress in the Matrix. One of them was called Evolutionary Psychology. The other one was called Mythologies. That was oh God, it wasn't Baudrillard. Can't remember who it was, but the bottom line is Baudrillard was Simulacra and Simulacrum. And what that was like a person is trying to simulate something that never, I'm going to simulate this. I'm going to simulate a particular something in the past. Simulacra and Simulacrum, basically simulacrum meaning I'm trying to go back to a time that never even existed. I'm going back to a time when men were men and boys were boys, and this was this and that was that, and back then when the things were right and all good and blah blah blah. But what happens if that wasn't the truth about the time that you believed? If it was, that was your perspective, but times were much worse, and you're trying to recreate something, this idyllic utopian time that never even existed in the first place. That's simulacra and simulacrum. You're just trying to simulate something that never occurred, that wasn't there in the first place, right? Okay. And I think that's what we're looking at. They're trying to hold on to world hegemony that ain't here. Hey, we're going to maintain the unipolar world. Yeah, but the world isn't unipolar anymore. Shut up, you idiot. That's where they are. They're living in a dream world. They're living in a false narrative. So again, to get to the foundation of this of my discussion, because that's what it's all about. The neocons are trying to hold on to a world that doesn't exist. So surely they're going to fail, because there's nothing to do. It's not even a matter of failing. You can't fail. What are you going to do? Okay, I got a plan. Magic. I'm going to concoct a spell in which I can chant a number of words. And as soon as I chant those words, that any piece of metal around me will suddenly turn to solid gold. Okay, that's a great plan, but people used to call that alchemy. How do we turn lead into gold? It ain't going to work. You got a great plan. Sounds like a good plan, but there's no chance of it working, right? That's where the neocons are. Hey, we're going to hold on to the unipolar world. That sounds like a great plan, except there's no unipolar world anymore. Shut up. All that comes down to this. So people always talk about solutions, right? Well, Garland, you always got lots of plans, but no solutions. Yeah, it's the story of my life. But my point is, the solution here in the United States is to confront the neocons with reality rather than call for them to do something. Let's call for the new neocons to act out of the kindness and concern for others. Neocons don't have kindness and concern for others, so that's not an option. Oh, okay. Let's call for the neocons to have some concern about the people in other countries, such as the Ukrainians. Hey, what about the lives of Ukrainians? They're like, yeah, aren't this great? We're throwing lots of them away. We may run out of Ukrainians sometime, but them damn Poles, there's plenty of them. We'll throw their asses into the fire next. They don't give a shit, right? So you can't appeal to the devil. Not, religious guy. I'm using that metaphorically. You must appeal to those that you can appeal to. So now what the people who are calling for negotiations have to do is expose reality. They got to poke the bubble. They got to say to the people of the US, look, we need a deal, but we can't get one because these bastards are lying to you. They really do. And this is hard. How do you do that? How does Dr. Jeffery Sachs, a guy who's been part and been respected by the machine, step outside of the machine and poke a hole in their bubble and say, look, guys, I got bad news. I got good news and bad news. We'll start with the bad news. You've been took, hoodwinked, misled, led astray. You've been bamboozled, on and on and on, right? You've been lied to. The truth is, our government claims to be good guys and a force for good, but they want to surround Russia and steal all of their goods. They want to break Russia apart. They want to impoverish the Russian people and steal all that gas and energy. The only thing they've done is they found the only thing that this war has done, that the economic war has done, it is cemented to the neocons just how important the commodities are that Russia has, just how powerful they are on the international economic stage, on the international diplomatic stage, that there are people saying, look, I'm friends with what Russia, not you. Why Russia, not us? Well, for starters, we need the gas and energy from them. Sorry, pal. We need like a lot of stuff that they have, not you. We're siding on because it's in our best interest to continue siding with them. Now, the Europeans are far too weak and vassal and stupid to do that, but there are a lot of countries that aren't. We've been told, oh, the African countries and the South American countries, darn those little brown people, they're intellectually inferior, morally inferior. Well, they ain't politically inferior. How about this? Now it's coming down to these countries that were supposedly the third world countries that didn't know anything. Who knows anything now? Now the US and the EU are like, hey, we're going to destroy our own economy. And the Africans and the Africans and the South Americans are like, oh, that's some bullshit there. Time out, man. You're asking us to destroy our economy? You sons of bitches? Yeah, ain't happening. So when it comes down to it, the Africans, the South Americans, the Asians are considerably politically and diplomatically smarter than the US and the EU. They're smart enough to say, look, hey man, we're going, you got a narrative. Your narrative is about Russia being evil, but we have a narrative, and our narrative is affected not only by your bullshit narrative, okay, Russians are evil, but we add other things such as history. History says when you were trying to screw us over, back then the Soviet Union helped us out against you. That's what the Africans are saying. The Nicaraguans are saying. That's what the Cubans are saying. They're saying, so we can add history into this. We can add our economic, before we make a decision, we use other factors, not just your narrative history. We use our economic needs, the needs of our people, all the basic material needs. When we take all of those factors into consideration, it is in our best interest to be friendly with the country that's providing us with the natural resources we need to eat, heat our homes, and move our vehicles around. That's what they're doing. So when it comes down to it, the people that were supposedly inferior are damn smarter than the Americans and the Europeans. They're smart enough to know how to survive, which makes sense. Because let me tell you something. This is a reality of life. Poor people know how to survive better than rich people. Poor people know how to survive. Rich people got some guy bringing them a drink. He's got bringing them things, doing everything. How does a rich person get a drink? Jives, bring me my wine, right? A poor person, they got to survive. They got to do whatever they want to. And when it comes down to, if the poor countries make the wrong decision, they die. It's like going back to some little village of people 1,000, 10,000 years ago, and they're living in a little village, and they had rules and regulations in their little clan, in their little tribe. What were the rules and regulations built on? Survival. You can do this, you can't do this. Why? Because if they made the wrong decision, they died. All of them, they starved, they didn't make it through the winter, they had to deal with reality. Poor people deal with the reality. They don't have time for a damn narrative. If they make the wrong decisions, they starve, they die, all of those things, right? That's why now you look at South America, you look at these countries that have been oppressed and held down, and you say, make a decision. Their decision is based on the fact that they have been poor for centuries. They've been held down. They've been robbed of their bananas and their coffee and their gold and all this stuff by the colonial powers. And now they're like, dude, we got to make decisions to survive. And that's all we make our decisions on, because we're poor. We're too close to the margins. We're too close to the edge. We do not have the luxury of sitting around living off of our savings. Because think about it. Isn't that what the EU is doing right now? Germany. They're going broke. Their economy stopped. They ain't making money. Their economy is in reverse, right? And what are they doing? They're living off their savings. They're saying, look, they're living off they're borrowing money. It's classic neoliberalism, right? I'm going to live off my savings till I run out of that. Then I'm going to borrow money, and I don't know what I'm going to do next. So what are the Germans saying? Well, we are going to go along with the US, which means that our economic model is shut down. So we got some savings, we'll spend that. We run out of savings, we're going to borrow. At some point, that comes to a head. At some point, you're poor. And because you've deindustrialized, you're borrowing money, and you don't have a job to pay that money back. Voluntarily quit your job. Think about this. Tomorrow, what are you going to do? You wake up tomorrow and you say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take out a loan for $500,000. And what else? And I'm going to quit my job. How are you going to pay that back? I don't know. Haven't came up with that yet. That's what the European countries, that's what the UK is doing. That's what the Germany's doing. They're taking out gigantic loans and they're shutting down their economy so they can't pay the loans at the same time. Not only will they face economic catastrophe now, but they're setting themselves for indefinite economic catastrophe in the future, and they will be owed their money to the IMF, the World Bank, in other words, the US. They're done. They're screwed. And that is intentional. That's going to now, they won't be able to do anything except what the IMF and the World Bank does. And might I add, the neoliberals have been wanting to get rid of their social safety net. They hate it. They're in the US like the Americans. Hey, why can't we have healthcare? They got healthcare in Germany. Oh, shit. I wish they would just shut up. And hey, how come we can't get our college paid for or something? They got that in Germany. Ah, God damn it. You know, the neocons are like, I hate the damn Germans. I wish they would get rid of all that shit because our people are asking for it. Now they found a way to get rid of it. You impoverish them, you get rid of all of that, you force neoliberalism on them, and you don't have that model that's problematic for you because your people are asking for some of the same things. Your kid says, hey, the kid next door got a new bicycle. His dad works the same place as you. You make the same amount of money as you want. If he can afford a new bike, I want a new bike too. And your wife says, you get the damn kid a new bike. Shit. That ain't good. What do? You go make you sabotage your next door neighbor so he loses his job. And then he ain't getting a new bike for his kid. Ha ha ha. Sorry there, little Johnny. He can't buy one. Well, you don't get one either. It's evil, but that's the way the neocons think. So the reality we're looking at here is, in order, let's sum it all up. In order to address this and to begin to bring it to a conclusion, those powerful people, Elon Musk, Dr. Jeffery Sachs, on and on, who are waking up now saying, hey man, this ain't good. We need to fix it. We need to do that, are going to have to appeal to everyday people. They're going to have to go around the media, which is nothing but neocon crap. They're going to have to go around the forces of brand. They're going to have to go around the array of forces that want to do these evil things, and then they're going to have to say, "Here's reality, and here's why we got to do it." Otherwise, here's the only thing that really happens, I think, because people want to know what happens otherwise, and I don't know if that happens or not. I'm just throwing that out there. What needs to be happened, but they're going to have to. Take a different route because the people that they're dealing with are just a bunch of liars and frauds, and they're lying to everybody. And the only way to build momentum, the only way to build enough people to push back on this are to say, look, people, you're being lied to. You got to wake up the masses. Once you wake up the masses can move, but you got to wake them up. And once you wake up the masses by telling the truth of what's really going on, it helps those of us who are in the anti-war coalitions, who are in the anti-imperialist. And what I mean is there are a lot of people that are anti-imperialist that don't even know it. When I say anti-imperialist, I can put it a different way. You believe in independence and sovereignty. There are a lot of people that don't even know it. Anti-imperialism is very, very simple. I believe that other countries should chart their own course, do what the hell they want, as long as they ain't trying to hurt me. If they do, or I can defend myself, but if they aren't, then I don't need to defend myself. Other countries should be able to do what the hell they want to based on their cultures, based on their history, their background, their people. That's their business. It ain't mine. I just saw somebody in here in the chat, something about China. China is oppressing this or that. Where is it? Let me find that. And I want to, and a good example of how an anti-imperialist would answer that. Let me find it if I can. Here's it says, China are dictators who hunt down Asian. Let's look at it. Let's talk about that. I think it's worth talking about. You know, whenever I see something that's versatile. Thank you, Adam, for making that comment, because it gives me an opportunity to address that. And I think this is appropriate time to address that, given the conversation that we're having right now. And by conversation, I mean, I'm doing all the talking. China are dictators. Let's think about this. China is an entire country of 1.4 billion people. If I were to take that literally, that would mean there are 1.4 billion dictators, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense. So here's what I think that Adam is trying to say. The government of China are a dictatorial totalitarian government. And well, that being said, I'd start by saying this. What business of it is mine if they are, Adam? I got problems of my own. Right? Hey, what's going on, Garland? Well, let's see. The gutters in my house are clogged, so we got leaks. What else? The sump pump ain't working, so the basement is full of water. Anything else? Yeah, little Johnny just fell down the stairs and broke both legs. Anything else? Yeah, your wife just came in and said she thinks she's having a heart attack. Okay, anything else? Yeah, the dog died. On and on and on, right? Anything else? Yeah, everything is bad. All right, what's your solution? The guy up the street, he needs to mend his fence. Perhaps I should deal with my own problems and stop sticking my freaking nose in everybody else's business. So I would say to you, Adam, China are dictators. What business of that is mine and yours? What China is? Are we like suddenly the international world's morality police and we got to go around and inspect every government? Well, let's see. Let's look at the government of Luxembourg. Let's look at the government of Antarctica. Let's look at the government of the moon. Are we somehow the moral political dictators of the world that we can go around the world? Think about this. If you're saying the government of China, they're dictators, well, what happens? Our government, we as world dictators have to deal with country by country by country and tell them how to do and what to live. Doesn't that make us dictators? And let me ask you this. If they're dictators, next question, does that matter? Let's just say they are. I'm not saying they are or aren't. Let's just go with that for a second. China's leaders are dictators. Well, let's do something else. How do you judge a government, dictatorial or non-dictatorial? Before we even get to where China is, how do you judge a government? By outcomes. If I got a business, I've had people working for me before. I had 100 people working for me at one time, right? At one point in my life, over 100. How do I judge these people? By what they are individually or by the outcome? I look at the outcome, and as a group, the outcome is acceptable, right? Well, then they can be whatever they want. I'm judging them by the outcome. So let's look at China. China's pulled 800 million people out of poverty. Number one. Number two, U.S. polls show that depending on which poll, somewhere between 86 and 93% of Chinese approve of their own government. If the Chinese government is or isn't dictators, but they're pulling a lot of their people out of poverty, number one. Number two, the actual Chinese people are in favor of their government. Then what difference does it make what they are, what kind of government they have? The reality is this: they got a right to have what they want. It's none of our business, number one. And number two, as long as the Chinese people are happy with it, why are we worried about it? Why we got to stick our nose in China's business? That's imperialism. We're going to go around the world. Hey, your country's a dictator. Your country's not. Your country's this. Your country's acceptable. Your country, who the hell are we to run around the world and tell countries what kind of government they should have when 90% of the people in the country are happy? That's a very terrible country. Why? Well, 90% of the people are happy. Hey, Dark Brandon, what percentage of the people? Liz Truss, 18% of the people in the UK. Oh, I noticed, Adam, here's what you didn't say. Liz Truss is a terrible prime minister and she has to be replaced. Why didn't you put that? Why has it got to be China's dictators and hunt down Asians in other countries? Where? Now they're hunting. I can tell you this. I can tell you the neocons have got bases all over Africa. They're hunting down people in Africa. They're hunting down people in Syria and blowing them up. They're hunting down people all over the Middle East, hunting down people and killing them. I can tell you the Ukrainians go to Moscow and they hunt down Daria Dukina and murder her. I can say the Ukrainians go down. Let me show you something. Let me show you something. Hunt them like you might have seen this. Let's see. They hunt down Asian in other countries, right? Right, Adam. And this is nothing personal, nothing against you. You made this, and it gives me an opportunity to talk to it. I thank you. Look at this. We're hunting them down and shooting them like pigs. How the Ukrainians are taking brutal revenge on the collaborators who've betrayed their neighbors and country, hunting them down and shooting them like pigs. Let's look at what we got here. China are dictators who hunt down Asians in other countries, hunting them down and shooting them like pigs. Where is this? This is from the UK. The UK is sitting there saying, yay, the Ukrainians, a bunch of friggin' Nazis who are hunting down Ukrainians. Are they hunting down people in other countries? They're hunting down people in their own countries by their own admission and shooting them down like pigs. So these are the people that we, the US government, controls. So how are we going to? Well, the people that we control are hunting down people in their own country and shooting them like pigs by their own admission. What's our concern? Hey, China's hunting down people in other countries. Really? Where? When? And if that's the case, oh, yes, we are the world police, so we've got to go address that immediately. No, we're not. No, we're not. Do you know how many people get shot by the police every year in America? Lots of people. I saw this one thing where there was this homeless guy running and he like threw a rock and they shot him dead for throwing a rock. I was a cop. Trust me, I'm not shooting somebody for throwing a damn rock. But they shot him full of holes because they could. I think we got a few flaws in our own system that need to be addressed before we go sticking our fingers in others' faces. And might I add, and Adam, you may notice something. Your comment just mysteriously happens to directly align with the CIA, with the NSA, with the worst neocons on earth. If you're taking a position and you happen to notice that your position directly aligns with the neocons, you might want to question that position. See, that's what kills me. There are a lot of people who are out here and they're like, yeah, the neocons are wrong about X. Now, why the neocons now? They got something here now. I think I might have to agree with them here. They're wrong there. My position is this. We got problems that we need to address. We need to get on top of them. We don't have business going around with joining forces with the neocons to ride around the world and just conveniently happen to ally with the neocons and say, well, the neocons sure got a point when it comes to China. Well, perhaps somebody ought to look at the United States and say, we got problems. What about all these homeless people running around? Somebody ought to look at Europe and say, they got problems. They're killing their own economy. And stop worrying about China and get our nose out of other people's business. I would argue, Adam, thank you for that. But I would argue that's how the hell we got in a position we're in now, where our economies are crashing, where our people are angry, where people are hungry in the richest countries in the world, can't feed their family, can't afford to go to college, all of these other things. By sticking our damn nose in everybody else's business and going around the world, China's doing this, Iran's doing this, Cuba's doing this, instead of saying we're going to back up and come home, we're going to deal with our own problems. What's wrong with that? That's the neocon mentality, I think, Adam. I will tell you, I'm not saying you don't mean well, that maybe you're dearly concerned about the Chinese, but I'm dearly concerned about the Americans. I'm dearly concerned about the Africans. I don't want them to starve, and the South Americans with all this crap and they can't get their wheat. I'm dearly concerned about the Germans and the UK and the Americans. People in Maryland. I live in Maryland. Man, you got to start at home, bruh. You've got to look at what's happening in your own house and fix it before you go around the world with the neocons pointing at everybody else's flaws. Can't do it. Now, I disagree with it. That is the road to exactly where we are right now. If we continue down that road, there's only one place that we can end up, and that is in tragedy and disaster. And I think we're already there. Okay, so let me end up with this. Sum it all up, right? The forces of Biden and Brandon cannot accept, for those who didn't watch everything, but I'd like to sum it up. They cannot accept the recommendations of these people for a peaceful negotiation, because a peaceful negotiation to the end of this would include two things. By its very nature, there are two parties that need something, and it would involve addressing the needs of two parties. Number one, and that is the Russians want security on their border. And in fact, the Russians want security for the Europeans on their border. And the fact that the US blew the hell out of the Europeans' infrastructure means that the Europeans ought to go with the Russians, because they seem to be looking out for you a hell of a lot more than the neocons in the Biden administration, right? So, number one, security on the border of Russia. If you want to take Russia apart and steal all of their resources, that's not an option. So the first thing that they need, the neocons oppose. The second thing would involve, and you know this, the second part of any deal, the Europeans are sitting there saying, man, we're hurting. We got to go along with this bullshit. But dude, we're losing everything, right? It would involve, the Europeans would pop right up. As soon as you said, hey man, we want a deal. Garland, you're the negotiator. I'd go in as the negotiator, what would I do? I would start off by making a list of the needs of both sides. What do you need, sir? And what do you need? Let's write them down. Well, I need security on my border. Okay, Russia, you need security on your border. What do you need, the EU? I need security on my border. Well, isn't that interesting? Those things align. I think we can make a deal there. Let's move. What do you need, Europe? We need cheap energy, man, or we're going to starve. Russia, what do you need? Well, we kind of sell energy, so it would be nice to sell. I mean, these bastards don't like us and we got issues with them, but we'll sell them energy. We're trying to eat, bro. And guess what? The Europeans would go like, well, we got issues with the Russians. We're like very racist fucks when it comes to the Russians. And we don't like them just because they're Russians. We really don't like Slavs, but we need energy. And it'd be like, the Russians want to sell energy. Will you sell it to them? Yeah, they don't like us, but what the hell? We're trying to get paid. If they want a little bit of energy, we ain't going to give them the deals they had before, but we'll sell them energy. Europe, what do you need? We need energy. Boom, I think we can make a deal there. In the real world, I could go in and negotiate a deal in no time. All I would have to do in the real world, in the world of reality, of realpolitik, all I would have to do is make a list of the things that both sides need, and you would quickly find out that Russia and Europe's needs, even China, align. But they don't align with the neocons' narrative, desire, and outcome. And the Russians could be honest about what they need. The Chinese and the Europeans, all of them could be honest because none of them have malicious intent. So they could all be honest. This is what we want. This is what we want. This is what we want. Wow, it's interesting. Those things align. We wrote them down. Now let's bring the U.S. in. U.S., what do you want? We can't tell you. Why? Because it wouldn't align with those things. Okay, U.S. neocons, you're at the table. Be honest, be clear. What do you want? Well, we want to rule the world. We want to be able to oppress all of the developing countries, and we want to control Europe, impoverish them. We'd like to tear Russia to shreds. We need to do regime change so that we can get Russia, steal all their stuff, and tear them to shreds. The other parties are going to go, those don't necessarily align with anybody else's needs. That's what the other parties are going to recognize quickly, that it doesn't align with any of their needs, that we got somebody who is an outcast here. And at that point, the other parties will say, get this asshole out of the room, and we'll get a deal. That's where we are. So since that is the case, I put it simply, but it's glaringly obvious. That being the case, the only way to get a deal is to get those bastards out of the room. And how do you do that? You must expose them. You see, neocons, neoliberals, warmongers, fascists are like vampires. They don't like light. They don't want to be exposed. They come out in the light, they catch on fire. Watch, I guarantee you take Victoria Nuland about about noon, take her out right in front of the light. What's going to happen? Whoosh, she's going to go up in smoke. She's a friggin' vampire. She is a demon beast from hell. And I'm not even religious, so I don't believe in demons in hell. But if I did, Victoria Nuland would be the first creature. She would be the first creature crawling out of that, crawling out of the fire. She's bad news. So the first step to this, and I think it's going to happen this winter because reality will kind of force this. The first step to this is really articulating the needs of all parties involved, then making offers as to the solutions and exposing the malicious intent of the neocon parties. Then you can get somewhere. That's what you got to do. And the forces of dark brand, and because their intent is malicious, and because it's malicious, they have to hide it. You got to expose it, and then that's how you get there. How that works, when that works, whatever, I don't know. And now this guy, let me say this. Democrats equals demon rats equals demon star. Look, you ain't going to get me to defend the Democrats. They ain't, the Democratic Party is a party of fascism. But do not be misled and think that either one of these parties in the United States is some bastion of freedom and democracy and liberty, and they're looking out for us. No, look, listen to the Republicans. The Republicans are pissed because we're not going to war with China. Hey, the Republicans are like, we need to recognize Taiwan. Well, what's going to happen if that? Oh, China's going to go to war immediately. Oh, they're better off? Hey, let's get those Republicans out there. They'll help us out. Then people have the nerve to say, well, some of the Republicans are what do they call them? Rhinos. They're Republican name only. No, they're not. You're the rhino. That's what you don't understand. Rhinos implies that the party itself somehow wants reasonable things, that the party itself is looking out for the American people and looking out for good and right. But there's a small group. Rhinos implies that there's like there's a small group within the party that wants terrible and malicious things, but overall the party has good intent. No, 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 my friends. It's the other way around. They are captured by the exact same corporate, neoliberal, neoconservative forces that the Democrats are captured by. The party in overwhelming is going to do the same damn thing. Look, you get the Republicans and they'll do the same damn thing with China as look at Adam. Adam's like, yo, the Chinese are evil. Here you are on here listening to me. I didn't even know why. Thanks a lot, Adam. I appreciate it. But here you are listening to me saying, this is bullshit, man. Let's get into reality here. And still, we've got, oh, but the China's dictators and evil too. That is the Republican Party right there. That is I hate people who ideologically disagree with me. I'm going to demonize them, and that will lead to some kind of a war. And we've got to go fix them because we've got the moral authority to go around the world and tell people what the hell to do. That's how we got here. So for those who want peace, if you're a Republican, or if you're a Democrat and you want peace and you want people to be treated with decency and respect, when you say Democrat in name only, you're the Democrat in name only. They're the real party. And if you're a Republican in America and you think, well, the Republican Party, they're going to do the right thing, we got a few rhinos that we got to weed out. Wrong. You're the rhino. That's the real party. That's reality there. That's what you got to grip on. It ain't them. You're the one with a problem. You're the one who says the direction the party is going in, I don't want it. I want the party to focus on Americans and our problems and fix our problems. And let's be honest and real about the problems and get to them. And the party's like, screw that. We're down with the neocons. Only problem is they don't quite want they don't quite want war with the same superpower that we want war with. That's that. So at any rate, thanks a lot, everybody. I appreciate it. For those who can help the channel, for those who can, I got to run. I don't have time for super chats. I'll do something later on, hopefully today or tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, where a couple of these things I go over all the super chats, but I got to run here in a short order. I got something I have to do. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Let me hit this one. A good old Sparky. Sparky, we can't let Sparky go. Sparky says, and this is brilliant. No such thing as Republicans and Democrats, only globalist establishment, uniparty, and the rest. There you go, Sparky. What can I say? What can I say, Sparky? Sparky I just did an hour running my mouth, and Sparky wrote one sentence with 100 with 100 characters and summed it all up. So that's why there you go. Sparky's far wiser than me. Thanks a lot, Sparky. Oh, by the way, I will be on George Galloway at some point today. I think it's 8:20 London time. I'm going to be on Galloway, so that's going to be fun if you get a chance. Those of you see it scrolling across the bottom, right? If you can buymeacoffee.com/Garland NH, there you go. Buy me a coffee. If you can, I don't care, whatever you can spare to help the channel. Certainly make sure you smash the like button, number one. Number two, rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. In case they toss me off here, YouTube, make sure you become a member on Rockfin. You can become a subscriber if you wish. That's $9.99 a month. I really appreciate that. Those who can afford that, it's a great help for the channel. And what you will get out of that is on Rockfin, every channel has premium stuff, and you can see anybody's premium stuff for $9.99 a month. And might I add, I do one premium show per week every Wednesday morning with Scott Ritter. That's $9.99. It's $9.99 a month. What it'll allow you to do, you'll see all of my stuff. I mean, for free, everything there. That one premium show on Wednesday morning, that's what that'll get to you. But you can see other premium stuff all over. So thank you very much. Certainly appreciate anybody who can do that. PayPal, you see my email, garlandn@gmail.com. Patreon, anybody that can do that, certainly appreciate that. $3, $5, $100 a month, whatever you can do, I certainly appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys. I really wish I had more time. I'm going to have to do the super chats and the Rockfin stuff, put that all together later, and thank everybody and read them out, because as we saw from Sparky, a lot of brilliant comments. That's one of the things I love about doing this show. I got a lot of really smart people. I learn a lot. My email is garlandn@gmail.com. If you happen to see a good story, a link to a good story you think I ought to cover, send it. That's a big help too. Peace. I am out.